it's a question of that we always get asked at the dinner table or out with our friends who we don't really know that well, but they know we're in real estate. It's how's the market doing?
Not only is it, are you going to keep the home for 3 years or 4 years or something like that?
Right.
But also, how long are you going to stay in this mortgage potentially?
Series of, court proceedings for basically just poor representation in the marketplace of values and services that people can offer.
Okay, how much would you list my property for? But also, what else are you going to do to help me sell my home? Because I'm going to walk you through this process. Not actually hold your hand, but maybe still a great time to sell.
Yeah.
Right? Because of all those factors we just talked about.
Hello and welcome back to the Discover Virginia Beach podcast. We have a really special announcement for you all to hear today. We have just hit our 50 episode mark, and to help create that happiness and joy alongside all of our wonderful listeners, we have a reoccurring guest joining us on the show today, Chris Rice with Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, excited to be here. That's awesome.
Yeah, we are super pumped because not only are we talking my favorite subject today, real estate, but we're going to be tackling probably one of the toughest questions out there for agents and also lenders in general that, quite frankly, not a lot of them are brave enough to answer like we are today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a question of that we always get asked at the dinner table or out with our friends who we don't really know that well, but they know we're real estate. It's how's the market doing? What does it look like for 2024? So we'll just kick off the conversation there, Chris, with the outline for our listeners here today. We're going to be tackling where the economy and the marketplace has been within the Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach area over the past few years and where that's left us in 2024, as well as some helpful guides and resources to help equip you as a seller or buyer to really navigate the landscape for the 2024 year. Sound fair enough? All right, Chris, how's the market doing?
Well, that's a loaded question, right? No, it's going great. I mean, we're obviously seeing a fair amount of buyers out there. We can always use inventory at this point in time, homes for sale. I think we're going to talk some about obviously inflation, price costs or cost of homes, things like that. But in the Hampton Roads market, I'd say that's pretty much right on par with the state of Virginia, as well as the nation as a whole. Right?
Yeah.
So,
because it has gotten more expensive.
Absolutely.
To live. I mean, since February 2020, the prices have only gone up. Eggs, milk, bread, housing. I mean, it's all relatively higher and the costs aren't going down. So you seem to have a positive outlook on the market. I'm curious with increased prices, how you can have a positive outlook.
Well, the thought is, right, yes, prices are continuing to go up, but that also means values of homes are continuing to go up at the same time, right? So yes, it may cost more to buy the home that you were looking at last year. To buy it this year, it's more expensive. In my humble opinion, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just is what it is. And it means that your home that you're living in has gone up in value as well, right? So to me, it's also a key to telling people like, yes, homes are going up. Prices are going up. If you're renting, that's not a reason to not buy. It's a reason to buy now, right? Because, I mean, again, in my humble opinion, that I don't necessarily see prices coming down at all in the near future, or maybe at all, right?
Yeah. Because a lot of people think, including myself in some regards, when I'm talking with prospective buyers and sellers, is, it's more expensive, so I need to wait for the sale to happen. I need to wait for the dip to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Or the crash, where a lot of people say, oh, we're just waiting for the next crash. And we saw that in 2023, it was the worst year ever for home sales. I mean, the home sales report over the past 40 years, I believe, according to NAR, they were cited, in 1995, that was the lowest it had ever been until now. I mean, the housing market slid 19% in 2023 from the prior year to 4.9 million pieces of inventory. So that would indicate a crash, right? Or a dip, right? No?
Well, just looking at that, right, you would say, with only that piece of information, you'd be like, oh, well, then home values had to come down.
Right. Did they?
No. So that's what I'm saying is just because demand has slowed down, we're so far below the inventory need that we still have an extreme lack of inventory to where even with that low level of demand, home values are still increasing.
Sure. Sure.
In this market currently, at least in Hampton Roads area specifically, you're seeing a lot of homes still going over asking, especially, in that under $300,000 price point, So, I mean, that right there shows you there's still a ton of demand out there.
Yeah, which is so fascinating because you look at like simple supply and demand, somebody wants more of something and we make more. And, the scales tip back and forth. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen in 2023. In fact, it seems like it tipped lower into this, like, home prices values are going up and inventory is still staying down. And as a result, buyer morale is lower because it's more expensive. Mm-hmm. So it just made the values go up even more. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have, I think from a buyer morale perspective, last year was extremely tough.
It was the toughest it's been in like 20 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the tough. So I've been in the industry since 2005. I think it's the toughest.
Or 30 years, sorry. 30 years.
I would say it's the toughest it's ever been since I've been in the business, right? You got increasing interest rates last year, as well as increasing home prices. It's one of those things you're like, well, what gives for me, right?
Yeah.
If you're a buyer, that was, often the thought is, well, something's got to be good here, right? Now, what I always told people is the fact that buying a home is, yes, it's probably the largest investment you will make in your life. But it's also a place you're going to live in, right? You have to live somewhere. So if you look at your home as just purely an investment, then it's really tough. You need to think of your home as somewhere you're going to live, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So is it better than, when rates were 3% or below? No, but those were historic lows, right? At the same time, the interest rates we were in last year and are in today are obviously better than the interest rate you're paying when you rent, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. When you compare the rent to buy scenario, for most folks, it just makes more sense to buy in the long run. Yeah. When you look at, according to your view lens, something you're living in, not an asset for you to, acquire more value in. Although that is a true case now, more than it ever has been when you do buy, over the past couple of years, that home value has increased and then some. Mm-hmm. And you saw that with home sellers too, when they listed. Yep. We had a few listings for, I worked on the buy side and the sell side, and it was just the asking multiple offers, above asking, waiving contingencies. It's crazy. And that's where we're going to kind of land the plane for this part of the conversation into 2024 is where that's left us. So Goldman Sachs reported the U.S. home price forecast to climb as high for mortgage rates in 2024 as 6.3%. This was as a couple weeks ago. Now we know that they've gone even higher to closer to 7%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at demands, when we look at factors like supply and demand, Chris, I'd like for you to walk us through. We'll start with sellers first, and people who are thinking about selling, just because like if interest rates are high and buyer morale is low, or buyers just aren't as readily available because they can't afford necessarily to buy a home in this market, does that mean that they should hold off on selling?
No, I mean, I don't think so at all because, again, we have such a shortage of supply, right? Such a shortage of homes for sale that even with, like you said, buyer morale being low and interest rates being high and, all these things, well, if you're thinking of selling your home, I mean, it's still a great time to sell.
Yeah.
Right? Because of all those factors we just talked about. I mean, still today, we are seeing, some homes for sure be going over asking price, getting into some bidding war situations, appraisal guarantees, things of that nature. So, I mean, those are all good signs if you're thinking about selling your home.
Yeah. But if I'm looking to sell my home and then buy a home, I get a little bit more nervous. So selling sounds like a great idea. I mean, gosh, I get my home valuations from you every month. For those of you who don't know, just email Chris, Chris Rice at AtlanticBay.com. Shameless plug here. And he'll set you up on a free search where you can get monthly reports on how much your home value could look like if you were to sell that month. Now, I got my report and it looked great. My value of my home gone up, as well as our investment property. It went up. But then if I look on the other side and I have to now then sell and then go out and buy with higher interest rates that I haven't seen ever, right? Because I bought when the sale was on. What do you tell somebody like me that's on the fence between selling and buying? And what type of factors would you look at for me to consider before I made that decision one way or the other?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I always tell all of my clients, like, look, I'm not here to sell you on buying a home, right?
That's my job. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sell you one way or another, right? That's a decision you're going to need to make. Like whether or not you want to sell and buy, that's a decision that you and your family need to make. My job is to show you the options available to you and help you come to a conclusion one way or another, right? I'm not going to be that pushy guy, That's just not me. That's not my style. But generally what I talk about is where are we at currently in the market? Where would your payment be? And generally what I'm asking beforehand is with each client is if you found the perfect house. Joe found you that perfect house, checked all the boxes, right? What would be the maximum you guys would be comfortable spending on a monthly basis for your mortgage payment? And then from there, I kind of just backtrack into, let the math do the math and figure out, well, how much home does that get you?
Right.
Right? Based off of roughly how much you're going to put down, all those things, and tell you, okay, that's roughly this much of a loan, which can get you roughly this much of a home. From there, it's up to you, the buyer, to determine if that's something you want to do or not, right? Generally speaking, I'll give some potential advice or something like that, maybe if asked. If somebody's going to sell a home that they're living in and, the home is valued around, let's say $280,000, and the amount of home that they think they can afford equates to about, 300 or 290 or something like that.
Right.
I'll probably tell them, like, at this point, I don't know. I mean, is it worth it to you, to just move, from one size home to the exact same size home? Now, again, that's up to them, right? They may be moving for a different reason. They may not need a bigger home, but they just want to be in a different area, right? They may be moving from one part of Virginia Beach to another part of Virginia Beach, or from Virginia Beach to Norfolk, or Chesapeake to Virginia Beach, things like that. That might be what they're looking for. Right. In those cases, well, then, yeah, maybe it makes sense, right?
Sure. And it seems like there's a couple different variables we look at on our end when we look at supply. So one of the factors is just basic life events. Nanny passes away, right? John and Kate can't make it work, right? Mm-hmm. They got to split ways. They got to get a divorce. Mm-hmm. Militaries. I mean, our area is full of people getting stationed to Norfolk, Virginia, not knowing what the heck it has to offer. Tons of fun activities and lots of breweries for our military folks out there. Just general relocation in general. So that's going to create some level of supply, right? Because people are just moving in and out. But what surprises me, though, and what kind of scares me is the new construction, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Chris. New construction was down nearly 17% last year, according to the RAIN report from March 2024. If we know that we have a shortage in inventory and everyone is aware of that, then why aren't more people building homes? And I'll do another follow-up question for all my eco friends out there. Why aren't we building homes with like solar panels and more readily available supplies to help make the homes more sustainable?
Well, that's a big question, right?
Save the big questions for you, Chris.
Right. I think a lot of that is, we've talked a lot, obviously, about inflation already.
Right.
And obviously inflation doesn't just hit, you, me, and, at the grocery store. It hits builders too. So, the cost to build went up. And so, there was some shock to that, how much inflation really kind of skyrocketed there, really hit some of the builders.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not a builder. I can't speak for a builder, right? But I would imagine that there was some shock and awe in that. And they were like, well, maybe let's slow it down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's, the idea is, or the theory is, and what I've been seeing is there's more new construction coming up. Permits are going up. So the hope is that there's more new construction on the way.
Absolutely. And Chris, I threw that curveball at you for a very specific reason. Humble brag here for our other guest on the podcast. Go check out our episode with Jasmine over at Napolitano Homes if you're looking for some new construction options that also are utilizing, that eco-friendly build.
Oh, nice.
For sure. And then, of course, our friends over at the Elizabeth River Project we had on the show talking about some ways you can create sustainability at your current home, regardless of the age as well. So those are some great resources, some free resources for you guys to go check out on the podcast. But, back on the subject of supply, another factor, too, that I think where a lot of people get hung up on at the dinner table or at events in general is this interest rate. And the interest rates followed by, if interest rates are high, maybe people are going to, have more delinquencies, and that translates to, more options for investors, right? Because investors are always looking for a deal, especially in this market. Time and money are what sellers are after, and investors can really fit that need. Chris, when you talk about interest rates in general, what are some of the things that you want to preface to the audience, to the listeners, to be mindful of when they hear that term, regardless of where the context is of the conversation?
So when discussing interest rates with clients, or just people in general, it's important to kind of preface it with remember, it's not all just interest rates,
right?
There's points and fees. There's mortgage insurance. There's all sorts of things that kind of get lumped together.
Such a pity. Such a pity.
Yeah. So, if you're only looking at the interest rate, then you're kind of missing the boat, potentially at least, because, somebody could quote you a phenomenal rate. But if you're not paying attention, you may miss the points, the discount points that are being charged to you to get that wonderful interest rate.
Sure. Sure.
So, the thought there, that's usually where I start, is explaining, discount points are just interest paid, up front, right?
Right.
So, yes, you get a better interest rate. That's because you're paying for it up front here.
And you do a good job at breaking down the math, because sometimes it makes sense to purchase discount points in the long run. It may pay for itself over a span of 12 to 24 months. But in most cases, at least from where I'm sitting on the agent side, it's better to put that towards other things like either your down payment or your closing cost, or hopefully you're able to negotiate your closing cost, or towards that emergency fund for when that repair breaks. Because funny enough, within that first year, sometimes things break. In most cases, it's going to be some more expensive items. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the statistic off the hand, but I think it was 50 or 60% of new home buyers experience major appliance repair within the first year.
Sure.
And having had 3 in my personal experience within my first year, calling Chris freaking out, I can attest that it was a great idea to have that emergency fund set aside as opposed to a discount point.
Yeah.
But it's all about your options and what you have available to, really figuring out where you want to load in the cost and the expenses.
I mean, going back to that conversation about interest rates and points and things like that, I kind of go back to okay, you want to spend this much per month max. Great. How much money do you have for closing? And then, not to say, I always say not saying we're going to spend all of that or we're going to, max out your monthly payment, but it's good to know, and then we can sit there and we can look at it and see what we have going. Important to know the difference in points and fees versus interest rate. So, like you said, one of the things I try to make sure of is we discuss, well, how much are you saving on a monthly basis versus how much is it costing you?
Right.
You want that break even. And not only is it, are you going to keep the home for 3 years or 4 years or something like that?
Right.
But also, how long are you going to stay in this mortgage potentially?
Because if the mortgage rates go down, you can refinance your mortgage, right?
Absolutely.
And get a lower interest rate.
Absolutely. And, if you refinance 2 years into your mortgage and, you spent, a ton of money on points just to get your interest rate down, well, now you've maybe wasted some of that money. Now, obviously, it did keep your payment lower during that, the 2 years you had the mortgage before you refinanced it. But ideally, you don't want to waste that money, technically speaking, right?
That's a good point. And especially considering the 4 main parts of your mortgage payment can fluctuate. Your mortgage payment month to month can fluctuate. So even if you do buy discount points, it can still fluctuate because you have the payment, the interest, the taxes, and the insurance.
Yeah.
And the taxes and the insurance, as we all saw in Virginia Beach over this past year, it went up. Mm-hmm. And if you're buying a home, this is something I had one of my clients, they called me on there. They bought this home that was a fixer-upper. Oh, yeah. And they fixed it up for, $100K, $200K over the original purchase value. That tax doesn't hit till that next year or the year after because of the, tax assessors and everything like that.
Yeah, or new construction. If you built a home and it took a year, to build the home, that the tax assessor isn't updating it on a monthly basis. You're more, and then not only that, but, yes, the tax assessor is going to assess it once a year, and that will adjust your taxes. But then also your mortgage company, only looks at your, how much is sitting in escrow every, year also. So
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention too, so the average price right now in Virginia Beach, or we'll say the median for the region as a whole, so Hampton Roads, 757, all those keyword SEO terms, Suffolk, Virginia, Portsmouth, Virginia, Chesapeake, Virginia, coastal Virginia area, 332. But as we mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, it was like 290, 275 to 290 range prior to 2019. So 2018, 2019, it was sitting there. And we have not only seen a price increase, but also an increase in the number of investors buying inventory. So nationwide right now, it's like 30% higher. That's according to housingwire.com, of just more people, more savvy, people with loans, whether they be VA loans or conventional or, hard money lenders, taking advantage of these deals where they see, oh, these home values are holding in value and they're going up a lot quicker. We're going to get into the business too, where, you kind of see more, action happen than we would typically see, 12, 15 years ago when it was just buyers and sellers,
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's always been investors within real estate, right?
Yeah.
But yes, you've seen a boom of it, right? Especially, in this area, we saw a boom of like short-term rentals, people wanting to buy those short-term rentals and flip those into these great deals, which definitely can work and everything like that. But so, that just opened up a whole nother avenue of potential investors. And then you throw on top of that some, we've seen some, institutional investors kind of moving into the market as well, not just in Hampton Roads, but nationally. So all these things have kind of caused a bigger boom within the investing community.
Yeah, it just creates more demand, right? And with inventory still being so low and values going up, it just makes more sense for investors. I'm curious for you, Chris, what role do you see investors playing in the local real estate market, and how do you see this impact on first-time home buyers and on the lending side as well? Doesn't it make your job a lot harder to sell those loans, to make those loans originated and happen?
As far as, I mean, to some extent, yes, right? Sometimes buying a flip can be a little bit more difficult as a buyer, but that's not super often.
Sure.
We do investment property, mortgages. Those can be as easy or as difficult as any other loan. So, investors as a whole, I think, can be great for the market, because generally, when I'm talking about these type of investors, I'm talking about like flippers and things like that.
Yeah.
Because they're taking a home that maybe is run down, wouldn't pass an FHA or a VA inspection, and updating it and creating kind of a new home feel for a home that maybe was built in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Giving it the love that it needed so that now somebody that needs to use FHA or VA, or for that matter of conventional, can now afford or can now buy the home, and they don't have to worry about necessarily going in and gutting a kitchen and, remediating mold or, changing bathrooms and all that stuff. They've kind of got that now. It kind of gives you a new construction feel.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. And that reminded me of another resource I wanted to shout out our local investors in the area too. So the Department of Housing and Communication, the Community Development, Department of Housing and Communicate. The Department of Housing has some great resources for investors with some tax credit programs. I'm not sure how effective they are, but they do have them available. So if you're looking for our investors out there looking for some tax incentive credits, just comment credit down in the comment section below. I'd love to send you some resources from the Department of Housing and Community Development that help incentivize folks to not only just like flip a house, right? Put in the new LVP flooring, make the bathroom look good, paint the pig kind of deal, but really go in and improve the structural integrity of the home and to make it something where, a new family or somebody who may not be able to afford that brand new construction home can now go and purchase as well. I think that flipping done the right way and investing done the right way can be not only financially beneficial to the investor, but also to the home buyer as well that, may not be able to qualify for all the money that they want in their first dream home, maybe a starter home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some good investors out there. I know some that are willing to work with buyers almost in a new construction type of way, where you get to go in and, they have the property that they've already bought and they're mid-construction, and maybe you pick the flooring you want or something like that, right? So, which
is incredible too, because and that's why, this question that we're trying to address is 2024 a good year to buy a home? I mean, inventory is low, right? It's extremely low, and interest rates are very high. So on the one hand, if you're just looking at that variable, it's not a good time to buy. But if you look at the other factors that we as professionals kind of see as the other avenues to take when life demands change, whether that's someone passing away or you have to relocate for a job or you just have more kids and you need more space.
Exactly.
We are looking for those avenues as well. And, regardless of interest rates, we're looking at buying power in a couple different variables. So some of the things we look at, and Chris, feel free to add to this list as well, but one of the couple variables I look at is the days on market a property's been listed. Sometimes Mr. and Mrs. Seller just get a little bit too much on the list side, whether that's the agent or the particular seller. Perhaps they think the home is worth more than the average buyer is willing to pay. Regardless of whether or not it's right or wrong, it sits on the market longer. And then we look at things like repairs needed. So you get those, flipper special homes that, they have an older roof, they have an older HVAC system, and that's something that the average buyer isn't going to just pay outright for. They're going to want some type of, insurance or remediation done to it. And then, of course, that's in the form of seller allowances. Anything else come to mind, Chris, when it comes to, leveraging the buying power?
No, I mean, outside of that, you would say seller concessions. I mean, along those same lines, right?
Covering closing costs.
Yeah, helping pay closing costs for buyers, things of that nature. I mean, it is an interesting market in the sense of I've seen homes that are going, above an asking price, and then I've seen contracts come in where the seller's paying 3% closing costs.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting market in the sense that we hit both of those things at the exact same time, So
yeah. And a lot of that, I mean, that's not happenstance though. I mean, a lot of that has to do with who you choose to work with, and we'll kind of steer into this next part of the conversation, because what happened in 2023 on the realtor side, personally for me, it was quite embarrassing. I mean, we have a lawsuit on our hands for sexual misconduct from the top executives over at NAR, whatever you want to call them, and then followed by a series of court proceedings for basically just poor representation in the marketplace of values and services that people can offer. They have a full report. Everything's still being negotiated on the legal side. So I'll leave it there. But I think it depends on who you work with. Chris, would you agree or not agree? When it comes to buying or selling the most valuable asset of your life, it comes down to who you work with, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing to kind of come from the lawsuit, we'll call it, is the fact that real estate agents need to do a good job of explaining the values they provide to their buyers and to their sellers.
Yeah.
Right? Not just going in, having you sign a buyer broker or something like that, and just leaving it at that. It's having a true buyer consultation of explaining, look, I'm not just here to help you find the home, on my website or wherever, and then go and open a door and maybe fill out a contract, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm doing a lot more than that.
You're not just opening doors. I mean, you are literally walking through an entire legal and financial process of purchase.
Yeah. And I think real estate agents as a whole need to make sure that they're fully expressing that to their clients or potential clients and saying, like, here's all the steps that I'm going to walk you through, and here's how I'm going to walk you through this. You need to have your, unique value proposition queued up to be able to tell a buyer or to be able to tell a seller, this is how much I charge for what I do.
Yeah.
And this is why, right? It's not just because, well, that's what we've always done.
It's what we always done. It's the industry standard.
Or this is what my company tells me I need to charge, right?
Yeah.
This is why, right? I'm going to provide you this much value because I'm going to walk you through this process. Not actually hold your hand, but maybe, but holding your hand throughout.
Depends on it's a fixer upper and there's a bunch of holes in the ground, right?
Right.
You gotta help them over that. But
But, walking you through this process, because it's not just, looking at a home, filling out some paperwork, and then the agent's like, I did my part. No, there's a lot more to it,
Yeah.
So, I think that's an important thing to remember, and therefore important for buyers and sellers to recognize when they're interviewing real estate agents to represent them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah.
To understand, like, when I'm talking to an agent, it's not just, if I'm looking to sell my house, well, how much do you think how much would you list my property for? Right. It's, okay, how much would you list my property for? But also, what else are you going to do to help me sell my home? And what else are you going to do throughout this transaction to make my life easier while I'm selling this home? I always say, the main things that make a real good real estate agent is knowing the contract and knowing how to negotiate, because nowadays with Zillow and all these other places, like, you might be able to find a house, yourself, right? But do you know how to negotiate? What's negotiable? What's commonly negotiated in this market? Probably not. I mean, unless you're in it, unless you're a real estate agent that's living in the market, you probably don't know what's commonly negotiated and what's not. And I mean, this goes not just, in a specific time frame, but some of these things can be negotiated differently based off of home value, home price, based off of, area. Certain parts of cities are different than other parts of cities on maybe what you may or may not feel you can negotiate for.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keeping in mind, having somebody you can talk to that's going to understand your needs, and also to be transparent with the process. Because I think where a lot of miscommunication might happen is that initial consultation where, someone's bidding for your business. They're going to offer you the sun, the moon, the stars, but like seeing a track record of that, or being able to, have an agreement where if you don't perform X, Y, or Z results within a certain time frame, then we can negotiate whatever pay or whatever resources or whatever variables that might incentivize a seller or buyer to then go and work with somebody else, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then, consumers have a right to be informed. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's not for the buyers, I heard this from another talk show. Shout out to the Real Estate Podcast. They were talking about the who actually pays the agent commissions, and a lot of people say the sellers. Sellers pay the agent commissions, but then if you look at it, it's like, well, the buyers originate the loan, and the loan is what pays all of the bills. So is it technically the buyers?
Well, yeah, technically it's the buyer, right?
Yeah.
Because they're paying for it in the price, right?
Right.
Which is kind of what caused this whole lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, technically it's the buyer.
I love throwing curveballs at you, Chris.
Even though it's, it comes out of the seller's proceeds
Right.
at the end of the day. But
Because the sellers get the value of the home, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, they own the property. Yes.
But, if the buyer's the one providing the money to the seller, right?
Yeah.
Then, you would say technically the buyer kind of paying for the real estate agent. Like you said, I think that this is going to cause some, definite change, obviously, in the industry. And I don't think, there's a lot of mixed emotions, especially within real estate communities, on whether it's all good or all bad. I think there's enough where it can be a little bit of both. And I think you're right in the sense that consumers deserve to be informed about the fees that are being paid and things like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll see what happens as we do with any legal lawsuit. We'll wait a couple years and it'll iron itself out. But in the meantime, we're in 2024, Chris. What tools and resources do you think are being underutilized, for the folks in our industry that could significantly benefit buyers and sellers today, right now in 2024? That as consumers are shopping around, right, for agents and lenders, what are some tools they should be on the lookout for to help indicate somebody that is a more, could be a more suitable fit for their needs or have more resources than, let's just say, the average Joe agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the first things I would expect, as a buyer, is somebody that's going to take the time in that first buyer consultation, we'll call it, to really tell me the process. Tell me what to expect, especially a first-time home buyer, right?
Yeah.
But not only first-time home buyers need to be walked through this. People that have bought and sold homes need to be walked back through it because things have changed.
If you bought a home in the 90s, it's definitely very different today.
Yeah.
So I've been told. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, even, early 2000s, right? So, yeah, I mean, a lot has changed, right? And it's going to continue to change, right? I mean, that's just one thing that will always happen is things will continue to change and evolve. So, having somebody tell me all the steps and processes that we're going to walk through to get to that final process or that final product of the closing is super important. I've seen people with the step-by-step guide where it walks you step-by-step through each, and they'll sit there and they'll go over each step. Like, okay, we're going to go see the home. Okay, we're going to write an offer on the home. Okay, we're going to negotiate during this phase. Here's what I'm going to help you do. We're going to talk through this or that. At that point, once we have a ratified contract, then we're going to go and do a home inspection.
Chris, are you plugging my free relocation guide? Oh, come on, man. You're too sweet. Comment relocation down below, and we'll send you this free guide because it covers everything you need to know when it comes to the buying process, as Chris alluded to, which is very important for just identifying the steps and the process.
Yeah.
You're too sweet, Chris. Thanks for plugging that.
Yeah, try.
So looking forward, Chris, if you had a magical ball, right, that could really help forecast what it is buyers and sellers to expect in 2024 and for the coming years in the Virginia Beach area real estate market, looking at our indicators now, what do you foresee being some of the things to be on the lookout for buyers and sellers?
Whew. Well, I always like to preface these conversations with, if I could tell you that, I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Joe. I'd be on a beach somewhere having made millions of dollars because I could, tell the future.
You'd be Marty McFly in the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. I knew where rates were going to go. So, I made all the right decisions. But with all that being said, as, inflation starts to get under control, which it seems like we're starting to get to that point.
Sure.
We saw some good indicators, end of last year, maybe beginning of this year. Things kind of fluctuated back up a little bit. But as we start to see inflation really come back under control, you're going to see interest rates start to come back down. How far down? That's a
we see
wonderful
2%,
question.
3% again, Chris?
I doubt it.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Well, I shouldn't say that. Probably not this year. That would
it's
be
funny because
pretty drastic. And
the
if
prediction at the end of of 2023 was it'd come down to like 4 or 5%.
Sure.
Q1, Q2 of 2024. But
really?
now we're here.
Yeah, no.
And it's like we're at 7 still.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see it slow down. Now, obviously, it all kind of depends on things that can fall out of our control.
Yeah.
And, that's out of the Fed's control too,
Sure.
right?
We are in an election year. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll throw that out there.
Well, not only that, but I mean, you have, oil prices going up because of things going on outside of our country, and things of that nature. So, as oil prices go up, well, what does that do to inflation? Well, it means inflation's probably going up, right?
Oh,
so
man. Macroeconomics, Chris. Oh,
I
my
know.
gosh. The real estate isn't just microeconomics. It's macroeconomics.
yeah. So, the hope is inflation starts to get under control because I don't want to pay more and more and more for milk. But also, hopefully that means, or that should mean interest rates start to come down. As interest rates continue to come down, obviously it makes it cheaper to buy homes on a monthly basis.
Sure.
On the flip side of that, unless we somehow see a significant rise in inventory, which I don't see happening. I mean,
not with our lagging indicators and 70% down, 17%, new construction down.
Right. That's what I was about to say. Like, we already talked about how new construction's been down. So, values are going to go up as well. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand out there. A lot of people would love to buy bigger homes. But they're like, I've got this really great interest rate. How badly do I need that bigger home?
Yeah.
So I think once rates get to a point where they feel more comfortable, they will end up, yeah.
It's okay. The audio's recording.
Yeah, they will end up jumping back into the market, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's a good reason to buy now. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but if you can afford it, buy now because, demand's only going to go up as interest rates go down. So
Love it. Chris, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to our dedicated listeners for checking us out on another episode of Discover Virginia Beach Podcast.